In the previous module, you had an overview of how democracy spread in the 20th century. We will carry the discussion forward and see the different stages through which democracy developed into its current form. The French Revolution in 1789 inspired popular revolutions across Europe against the existing monarchs of the time. The quest for democracy during this time was limited to freedom and equality. But the meaning of equality differed in different countries. For example, the United States initially did not allow anyone to vote. African Americans all over the country did not get the right to vote until 1965. Similarly, in France, women received the right to vote only in 1944. Many European countries that were becoming democratic did not have complete adult franchise. In other words, the struggle for democracy started with the rights for white men in the United States and France, and it took a lot of time to trickle down to the rest of the population. In the later years, primarily in the 20th century, the struggle for democracy included the right to vote to be granted universally to all adults, men or women, rich or poor, white or black. This is termed as universal adult franchise or universal suffrage. Observe the screen to see when universal suffrage was granted in various parts of the world. The earliest example of universal suffrage was New Zealand, where every adult had voting right by the year 1893. You may recall that many countries became democracies by the year 1900. These countries were indeed democracies, but the governments were elected mostly by men. And in the case of the United States, mostly white men. You also studied that countries in Asia and Africa were colonized by European nations. All these countries became independent. They also wanted the liberty to choose their own leaders. Many of these countries became democracies immediately after the Second World War in 1945. Few countries like India had succeeded in maintaining a democracy till date. Other colonies across Asia and Africa were not able to sustain democratic governments. For example, Ghana, a country in Western Africa. Ghana was a British colony and was called the Gold Coast, as it had rich gold reserves. Ghana was also amongst the first African countries to gain independence in 1957. Kwame Nkrumah was an active revolutionary in the independence struggle. He became the first Prime Minister and then the President of Ghana. The democratic tradition here, though, was short-lived, as Nkrumah elected himself President for life. Subsequently, he was overthrown by the military in 1966. Many countries in Africa and South America suffered a similar fate. More recently, around 1980, democracy was revived around the world, beginning with several countries in South America. This process of world democratization was accelerated by the collapse of the Soviet Union, which controlled much of Eastern Europe. You may also recall from our earlier discussion that Poland had democratic elections in 1989. The breakup of the Soviet Union into many independent countries led to major changes in the political map of the world. During the same time, changes also took place in our neighboring countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh. These countries struggled and transformed themselves into democracies from military rules. However, Pakistan slipped back into military dictatorship in 1999 when General Pervez Musharraf led a military coup against Nawaz Sharif, the then Prime Minister of Pakistan. Similarly, in 2005, Gyanendra, the new king of Nepal, dismissed the democratically elected government and restrained political freedom that the people had struggled to achieve for so long. However, about 140 countries held multi-party democratic elections in the year 2005. This number was higher than ever before. Yet, many countries, including powerful nations like China, North Korea, and Burma, are still non-democratic. These are countries where people can neither express their opinion freely nor elect their leaders. Myanmar, previously known as Burma and also a neighbor of India, is a case in point. It gained independence from Great Britain in 1948 and became a democracy. Democracy in Myanmar did not last very long, as the country was taken over in a military coup by General Ne Win in 1962. In 1990, the country made another democratic stride by holding free and fair elections after almost 30 years. The National League for Democracy, led by Aung San Suu Kyi, won the election. As a result, these elections were not recognized by the Myanmar military, which placed Aung San Suu Kyi under house arrest and dismissed the election results. What followed after this and continues till today is imprisonment and torture of political activists or anyone who's critical of the regime. Due to the repressive military government in Myanmar, about 1 million people have fled the country and have taken refuge elsewhere. Aung San Suu Kyi continues her campaign for democracy in Myanmar, and in 1991 even won the Nobel Peace Prize for it. However, the country is still struggling to return the rights of the people. As you must have noticed, if the democratic tradition in a country is weak, then the gap is usually filled by stronger sections of the populace.